And we are live.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Guitar Gear Locker. My name is Alex Brooks. This is my co-host Roger, and tonight, once again, we have our friends Rick and Jeremy joining us for our little bleh, history of hard rock and rock and roll and heavy metal. So tonight we are, and actually, what is this? Tonight is what live show?
44. Live show 44.
Live show 44 tonight. And so tonight we're going to continue our journey into hard rock. And tonight we are focused on the 1970s, which is my all-time favorite era in rock music. And pretty much all my all-time favorite records were made in the 1970s.
I wasn't born yet, so I don't know.
So it should be a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 1970s also like kind of the year that metal was born, right? So like, if you like, that's when Black Sabbath 1 comes out, and there's already Zeppelin and Deep Purple, but that's like when anybody I've ever talked to is like, that is the first
metal.
Here we go. This is we're officially started. We had a kind of like a soft opening before with Zeppelin. Now the gate is open. Heavy metal is the thing.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about 1970 first Sabbath record, you got Deep Purple in Rock that came out.
Yeah.
And, what's the Zeppelin? Actually Zeppelin 3, right?
Zeppelin had 3, which did have the Immigrant Song, which was pretty heavy.
Yeah. But it was a
departure.
Departure,
with the acoustic
from the more hard rock of the
right.
It's almost like they were rebelling in a way. We're like, everybody's doing the heavy thing now, so we got to like turn completely opposite, like contrarian,
And it's funny because I don't know if you guys remember that first Led Zeppelin box set that came out.
Oh yeah,
in the early '90s or
what with the crop circles on it and stuff.
Yeah. I think it was '88 actually, because I got it when it was new. It was for like spring of '88.
So there was a quote in the book that came with the box set from John Paul Jones, and it was regards to Zeppelin 3. So the quote was, "This was the first record that we were not compared to Black Sabbath."
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, but Zeppelin 3 is my favorite Zeppelin album, actually.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it was obviously a departure. They got more into the folk side of things, and it's a Tangerine, and a few of the songs on their Friends, and stuff like that. But yeah, so 1970, I think, is kind of like you said, Black Sabbath and Deep Purple in Rock came out, and there's a lot of other stuff like Cactus. I'm pretty sure the first Cactus record.
Oh yeah,
right. Yeah, it was around that
69 or 70.
Yeah. There's even like some obscure stuff like I don't know if it was like maybe 70, but early 70s. If anybody remembers a band called Toad from Switzerland,
heard of.
Toad was a pretty heavy band, So there's a lot of stuff that was going on. The bands kind of charting in the more heavier directions and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you also had like guys that came up in the 60s in like kind of psych rock bands sort of dive into it. It was like it became a trend almost for some people. Like I don't know if you guys know the band Ursa Major from like the early 70s.
Not familiar.
No.
So you may be familiar with a guitar player named Dick Wagner who used to play.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So in the 60s, he had a garage band in Detroit called The Frost. Then he moved to New York, and he did one record with this band, Ursa Major. It was his band, which, fun fact, Billy Joel was in on piano for like a minute before they recorded. But it was in New York, and just like that's 72, but it was like somebody who was onto what was loud and cool at the time in the 60s, but was more song-oriented, almost pop garage rock doing a heavy metal record. Like half of it's like not quite so heavy, but like the first song is so heavy that like everything else like doesn't even matter. But they're and then you have like Ted Nugent, who goes from the M-Boy Dukes,
Yeah.
to like the solo career, which is very snarly and loud and obnoxious.
Right.
Z Top. I think the first record may be 1970 or 71.
Yeah.
71. Yeah.
You know, so I mean, you know, come on, man.
Another psychedelic to heavy metal ish.
Yeah.
High volume power chords, bombastic, like loud stuff. Definitely by that.
Another thing I was going to add too, as we keep going on here, since we're in the early part of the moment, 1970. Let's talk about just briefly music that was coming to an end in 1970. For example, the Beatles breaking up, so they're gone.
Yeah.
Sadly, Jimi Hendrix passes away, so there's no more Hendrix. You know, the Hendrix is gone. Cream with Eric Clapton had broken up, and Eric had gone on to other things, and of course, we're going to end up doing Layla in '71. So you had all that was kind of going away, and now you got this new door opening. Like we're talking about Black Sabbath, the first Sabbath album, these other groups that we're talking about, kind of starting to pave the way for what's going to happen here as we start marching into the deeper part of the '70s.
Yeah. Uriah Heep, another one.
Uriah Heep, absolutely.
Nazareth. I mean, you know, Nazareth was from Scotland, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And here's a question. Remember, we're talking Deep Purple from last time. So we had like the Mark II lineup that we know with Ian Gillan, and that's when they got heavier within rock, like you were talking about.
Yes.
Was any other band ever referred to as quote unquote Mark I or Mark II? I only ever recall hearing that with Deep Purple, the Mark I lineup, the Mark II lineup. Was that ever used for any other famous rock band?
I can't think of any. I might have referred to some band at some point as a Mark I or Mark II, but only because the Deep Purple thing was my point of reference for it.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, right? Yeah.
When I was a kid, I bought like probably about 1980 or 81, early 81, when they had the Deep Purple, like the greatest hits, the deepest purple is what it was called. I was just a young kid. I was just getting into guitar playing. And on the back of the album, it would say, you know, this has the Mark I or the Mark II lineup with Ian Gillan, and then it has the Mark III lineup with David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes. And at the time, I didn't really quite understand what that even was, you know. And then as I start to learn more about rock music and the history of Deep Purple, and like I said, I never saw anybody else really being referred to as like, okay, Mark I, Iron Maiden with Paul Di'Anno, and then Mark II, you know, Bruce Dickinson is singing on The Number of the Beast and Peace of Mind.
Sabbath with Dio, you know.
Right.
Well, there aren't a lot of bands that had such like drastic levels of lineup change occur. Like
they had a lot of people in that band.
Mark I has
a flowchart poster to keep up with it, you know.
Like Mark I has a hit. Mark II has the explosive, you know, legendary forever heavy metal records.
Right.
And then Mark III just sort of like flipped the script, like, wait a minute, who are these people? And then like, oh wow, more great songwriting, you know?
Yeah, right.
So like it is unique to them in that sense too, I guess. But
and also it marked the early 70s, kind of marked the beginning of like the whole progressive rock movement too, with you know, Yes and King Crimson and Genesis, and you know, so there was all that. Then you had Mahevenish Orchestra and all this, you know, crazy technical stuff that was coming out. Jeff Beck, you know, and,
no doubt
he was doing, and so music was learning, you know, moving into a more progressive technical era of guitar playing and musicianship.
You
know? I fully agree. Yes.
Is that where it was kind of branching out into the subgenres also?
Yeah, I would guess so. But
Maybe where it kind of started.
1970s, there was so much diversity going on, you know, in music, and it still wasn't, you know, separated like things, you know, how things kind of went in the 80s, you know, where everything started being separated more, where you had more diversity, and there was, you know, you weren't like pigeonholed in certain areas, like, okay, you're this and you belong to this group and that group, you know.
Yeah, I kind of equate that heavy metal subgenre thing to like pre-thrash, post-thrash, because after thrash, there's all this like, because before that it's just all heavy metal. and thrash
Right, yeah.
metal comes out, and it's like, well, this is heavy metal, but this is like, you know, a cranked out, crazier version of it. And then
Yeah.
from there, thrash
speed
metal
metal,
influenced
or
so
something.
many things. Yeah, speed metal, I guess, preceded that, but yeah. And then from there, kind of the subgenres explode because you took one sound, made it two, then made it four, and so on and so on.
Right,
To
right.
the fact that now, like, you know, in the 90s, it was death metal. And then in like 2025, it's like there's 25 different kinds of death metal.
Yeah.
I found that out the hard way a couple of times.
Need a flow
Well,
chart.
but
for that.
I guess what I
Yeah.
was getting at is like it seemed like through the 50s and maybe 60s they just referred to it as rock and roll, but then you start getting into heavy metal music, if you will, and then even progressive, you know?
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah. I guess,
maybe
yeah,
not even subgenres, but just different types of
progressive rock,
if you will.
fusion comes to play, like Mahavishnu, like Alex was saying, and like,
Right.
And then you had bands like Alice Cooper, with one of my favorite bands, the original Alice Cooper band.
Mhm.
oh yeah,
You know, that, I mean, they were just like, what, you couldn't really put a label. You know, they had heavy stuff, but there was this very avant-garde stuff that Alice Cooper would do, and just,
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
aggressive at times, you
Right.
know. So it was like, what are these guys? You know, where do they fit in? You know, but you know, Alice Cooper had a huge influence, I think, on hard rock and heavy
Oh,
metal. And I wouldn't consider Alice Cooper a heavy metal band. Maybe, you know, as he became solo in the '80s, he kind of got leaned.
no, I know
into
what you mean. It
you know?
it wasn't heavy metal. It's kind of like Blue Oyster Cult, like especially the early stuff where
Band,
not
yeah.
necessarily heavy metal sonically. They're not pounding you in the face with like the machine, but
Mhm.
there's like an atmosphere about it that's got a darkness and a like a sinister, almost like yeah, like sadistic nature to some of the lyrics and stuff like that. You know, is certainly heavy metal in vibe.
It
Yeah.
could almost
Yeah.
be called like interpretive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's
There was
whatever-
still, everybody was still, there was still the blues in there. There was still folk music in there, you know, but I don't think it was until maybe almost mid '70s that things really got super hard. You had like the first record with Michael Schenker, Phenomenon, you know, the UFO, for his first record with UFO. You had a record like that. You had the first Priest record come out, you know, Rock-a-Rolla.
Right.
I think what, '74, right? Something. I'm pretty
Yeah, I
sure.
think it might be 73, 74.
You had Kiss,
74 for Judas Priest, rock and roll.
Yeah,
74.
Right.
and then you had Kiss, first Kiss record, you know, which was a heavy record, you know. There was, you know, music started to become more metallic sounding, you know. I mean, it's like, think about Michael Schenker's guitar tone, you know.
Right.
And then
right.
you had, you know,
Thought about it today when I was listening to it.
yeah, and then you had
Oh,
Black,
yeah.
Deep Purple, and start Rainbow, and you know, music started to become more, I would say, more dark and more metallic, you know,
Well, just
aggressive, you know.
the idea of like writing whole musical passages with like the power chords or like the fourth chords, like, and just like the main riff to Deuce, like the like the riff, not the verse of the chorus. You know what I mean? The da da da.
Yeah.
Like that type of guitar playing was kind of comes into existence because of the level of distortion and volume that's increasing with the technology of like the Marshall stack with the humbucking pickup, and then people discovering little circuits that they can put in between there to really push it up to like next level. Then you see like, you know, DiMarzio super distortion pickups come out, and that's pushing amps, you know, and so on and so on. But like just taking, when you're holding a Les Paul through a plexi at full volume, which I don't recommend one does like a lot. It's so goddamn loud. But like there's certain things you kind of have to play to harness that power. So like playing cowboy chords and like arpeggiating them is not necessarily going to get the same sort of result out of that as just pounding chords. If you're pounding away simple chords, you're not going to be feeding back. You're not going to get those ghost notes because you're just like
Right.
using the volume and the distortion to really get a point across, but also push power off the stage.
Yeah. Speaking of chords, I mean, first Aerosmith record came out. What was it? 73.
73 for the
Yeah.
first.
You know, so that was also a change in the game. You know, it was kind of like a harder edge Led Zeppelin. You know, maybe a more aggressive, bluesy Zeppelin.
Yeah.
you know,
Just
approach.
embracing the crunch, because there's
Mhm.
fuzz, but fuzz is like you could play like nobody listens to the American Woman fuzz tone line and goes, "That's a nasty hard riff." You can be fuzzy and soft, but the crunch of like the first couple Sabbath records and Deep Purple and all that stuff is kind of like at least guitar wise, and what are we but a bunch of guitar nerds?
Right.
That's like the defining thing that like I think like when somebody listens to heavy metal, the defining characteristics initially to me are like powerhouse drumming and like serious crunch in the guitar tone, where the guitar suddenly is a wall of an instrument as opposed to a component in a band.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like itself is an orchestra among these other.
Yeah, and it's completely on the forefront of everything.
Yeah.
Where it was kind of more in the mix, maybe in the background a bit, or more in the mix of things. And,
it was an accompaniment before. Now it's like the idea of the riff is like much more of a thing than say just playing chord progressions, which still exists in every band, but like the riff, the single note kind of drony move you, kind of create a sense of nastiness and power. It all comes together in those early 70s, and then with some guitar players who just like are breaking the rules, but in a way where the playing is getting more technical. It's more, it's always been bluesy, but now we're getting like classical influences, scaling, kind of like modular playing as opposed to just the pentatonic stuff. You hear a lot more diatonic playing, and
Uli Roth, and people like Uli Roth emerge, and Richie
Blackmore, and
That's what I was going to ask. Is during this time, what are the who are the guitar players that you all think are kind of blazing the trail?
My opinion, I would say, early on, I would say Richie Blackmore and Jimmy Page and Iommi, obviously, but then, like to bring up the progressive thing, you got people like Steve Howe, that, in fact, what did it was a recent interview I just saw with David Gilmour, and it was about progressive rock. And he was like, we got, we were considered a part of progressive rock, but he never really considered them that, and he goes, to him, the guy that embodies progressive rock, he was like Steve Howe,
Yeah.
Right. And
so,
Steve as well.
Yes.
Yeah, just
I would say some of those guys. And then you had Schenker come along a little bit later.
And Robert Fripp, too, the King Crimson stuff. I mean, you've got 21st Century Schizoid. You've got the Red album that came out in 74. The song Red that had some pretty heavy, dirty, cool guitar playing in it,
Yeah, and drum wise too. Drums.
Yeah, Bill Bruford on that. Yeah.
Bill Bruford, Ian Pace, these guys were taking drums to a whole new level.
Yeah, it went from like basic rock music in the 60s. Not all of it was basic, but I think you know what I mean, where it's more based in blues and folk to, the jazz influence of playing with intent and playing like, because I think in jazz prior to rock and roll, there's this idea amongst the musicians that like, we're in this for us and we're going to take you with us. Whereas like a lot of folk and blues is kind of like, we want to make you dance. We want to be part of the show. But it's like a jazz mentality of just like, no, this is all about music. And then in with that comes like musicians who studied that sort of music and classical incorporating that into the primitive, you know, kind of bashing high volume stuff that, you know, inspired it from the blues based stuff of the 60s, but just being like, yeah, that's cool, but my mom made me go to guitar lessons and learn classical, and I can play these scales up and down like a, you know, a madman. And we're going to incorporate that because, yeah, you have, you know, Steve Hackett, Steve Howe, you have Richie Blackmore, who I think spawned a million technical players because of his just highly disciplined like technique, while still combining rock meanness and toughness and cynicism and attitude into playing.
And really percussive, you know, the
Right.
And you got Brian May, another guy that came out.
Right.
That
Very similar in that way. Yeah. Yeah. Just you start adding this sort of refinement to a music that critics of the day hear as primitive, but the people who really know what's going on, you know, are like, no, you don't get it. Like, it's kind of like if somebody today hears Immolation who's never heard death metal before, they're going to freak out and be like, what the hell is this? But if you understand where it comes from and what it's trying to convey, you're like, this is, you know, this is like high level shit.
Right.
You just, you know, you either understand it or you don't. Kind of like jazz.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, some stuff, you know, obviously you got the progression of like where music starts getting more aggressive. It's hard to digest, especially, you know,
Yeah.
you know, like Immolation, like our producer Paul, who's worked since the 70s, you know, with all these guys, whether it was like Leslie West, and you know, he comes from working with all these people from back then, and you know, he didn't understand the band. He didn't want nothing to do with it at first. He was like, I don't want to work with you guys. I'm not good for your music or anything. And then as he started working with the band, he really started to appreciate the music and the musicianship of the whole thing.
Yeah, because, well, real music fans get stuff, I think. Like, if I hear something that's out of this world I've never heard before, and it sounds just like a pile of crap being thrown at the wall, that's going to come across immediately versus something else where you're like, oh, these people are putting a lot of thought into this, and maybe I don't understand what they're doing. I mean, there's like hardcore bands up here that play like kind of a real noisy, mathy sort of a thing. And for me as a guitar player, I can't relate to it, but I'm hearing it and I go, there's like intent there, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
And you need those pioneer producers to kind of help those bands out. Like, I'm sure the people who recorded the first Sabbath record were like, can't wait for today to be over, you know?
It's funny because I saw Phil Collin ask from Def Leppard ask Tony Iommi. He goes, yeah, this, you know, how did you get that guitar sound on the first record? And he goes, I just turned up.
Yeah.
Turn it up for 11.
At the core, what I've learned making records is that, you know, it's not necessarily, you know, some of it's complicated, but like if you have a good player and a good tone, whether it's a drummer who can hit an in-tune drum kit or a guitar player playing through a rig that sounds good, it's not that hard to capture it. You know?
Yeah, sure. I agree.
The devil's in the details, and you could go as far as you want to with like how much, you know, detail you want to get into with that stuff. But like, yeah, like I totally believe Tony when he says like, I just went in there with my sound.
Yeah. Well, here's a rhetorical question. Going back to the early 70s, like we were saying a few minutes ago, so many wonderful new explorations of music are starting to happen. So, and like what I said, all these labels are popping up. So as a person, all right, you're making a heavy metal album, you know, you're making a progressive rock album, or you're like, we're doing what we do. And then some critic said, we're heavy metal, or, you know, Jethro Tull, there's some heavy distorted guitar in some songs, and then there's flute. So what is it? Is it folk? Is it prog? Is it hard rock? Is it post psychedelic? You know, what is it? Labels start getting thrown everywhere.
Well, it seemed like the term heavy metal in the early 70s was thrown about sort of as a tongue-in-cheek insult. So you would call Jethro Tull a heavy metal band to tell the reader, they're one of those bands that plays really loud, and the
Yeah.
vocals are probably kind of wild.
Mhm.
It doesn't become this like refined, defined thing until, you know, some years later, particularly I guess with like Judas Priest saying, yeah, that's us.
Yeah, we're metal and we own it, you know.
Right. But
Whereas,
before that, it was
we don't
like,
want to be metal. Like, you know, Zeppelin, they never really liked the metal term
Right.
at all, you know.
But
I
in
think
the
even-
70s, what were they calling Genesis and Yes? I mean, now we would know them
Well,
as
art rock is I was
Art rock. Yeah, I
rock.
think it was they
Art
were
rock.
art school kids playing art rock, and they were playing music that you'd expect art school kids of that day, I guess, to.
Yeah.
Really?
Come up
I
with.
never knew that.
Yeah, that's I've heard that in several things about progressive rock, that a lot of it wasn't even really called quote unquote progressive rock right away. That art rock terms seemed to be thrown around a lot, and then just as it kept going, progressive rock, or a lot of people use the word prog, you know, which of course carries heavily the metal. We have prog metal, of course, but I mean that early, you know, the 70s, the King Crimson, the Gentle Giant.
Gentle Giant, another one.
Emerson, Lake and Palmer,
Yeah.
and some of that, you know, that has influenced metal as we keep going on in our analysis of all the, you know, things that have happened with hard rock and heavy metal music.
Right.
Yeah, then you had the stuff going on in Germany in the late 60s, early 70s, like Amon Düül and like that, what would be later known as like krautrock stuff.
Right, right.
Where it's just like, but that stuff was, you know, available at record stores in England, I'm sure, and you know, just more kind of weird, esoteric exploration with the new technology. Because like we think of like a Les Paul or a Telly or a Strat from that era as like this classic vintage instrument. When these bands were using this stuff, this was like the hot new shit.
Yeah.
And so they were like, wait, what's that? That amp does what? Okay, cool. Well, you know, this, what? You have a pedal that does a whooshy sound? I want to add that.
Right.
At the time, it's just all new stuff. Now we're like, oh, it's classic. You see a picture of John Lennon with his 60s Rickenbacker, and you're like, man, what a cool guitar. And you're like, yeah, he got it off the rack at the guitar store and played it like you buy a Schecter today, you know?
It's like those, you know, there's famous instruments that Jimi Hendrix played, his V, you know, that was like a 67 V, you know, with the tremolo arm on it, because they stopped making the V for how many years? I think it was like 58 to 59, and then they weren't selling, so they didn't make them anymore until I think 67. I'm pretty sure.
You're right. That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. So you know, Jimmy's playing that V, and Jimmy's got. I don't know if you guys remember, and I got obsessed with kind of that color and the way that SG looked. He had a white SG.
Oh,
and I think he had a Bigsby on it or something.
Well, I think it might have been the what the hell is that called?
Or that little whittle stick or whatever.
Sideways tremolo.
Yes, the sideways.
Yeah.
And I seen that guitar recently. I saw John 5 playing that guitar.
Oh wow!
Thing, and he was playing it, and he was just like, "Wow, this has got to be the thinnest neck I've ever played on an SG. This is like butter."
Huh. Okay.
And it sounded as good now that it did then. You know, if you've seen any like Hendrix videos of him playing that SG, you know. But those guitars were brand new, like you said, Jeremy. They were like right off the rack then, you know.
Like most of Jimi Hendrix's Strats were just like, I went into a music store that day and bought a Strat and didn't think much of it because they were consistent. They all sounded like Strats, and it wasn't like, you know, we go on these quests as guitar players. I certainly have. I want Les Paul custom. Well, I have to play through 5 or 6 of them and find the one before I actually decide. And then it was just like, do you want it? Here it is. This is.
I've been doing that at home lately. I was like, I got to record rhythm guitars for the new album.
Dude.
So I've been going through everything. Like, all right, so I use this, or I don't know.
And back then, it was like stock everything, stock pickups. There were no modded amps, really. I mean, I'm sure they modified them to be roadworthy or something, but like, if you bought a Les Paul with pickups, the pickups were the pickups. There were no aftermarket. Like, because I'll buy a guitar and somebody will be like, well, are you going to change the pickups? And I'll be like, no, I bought the guitar. It's part of the guitar.
Right.
I might later find that there's something about the pickups worth changing, but like, it's like, yeah, it's just that wasn't even a thought back then.
And it was actually even the beginning of kind of custom guitars starting to kind of come into light, because if you think about Tony Iommi got that SG, the J Diggins, I think, made him those SGs with 24 frets and an ebony board on them.
Mm-hmm.
And he had those custom pickups put in. You got people like Brian May and his father who made his guitar, and because they wanted something that wasn't available then. And obviously, fast forward a few years later, Eddie Van Halen and everything that he came across, in his search for tone and feel of the instrument. But yeah, there was like even those things happening, because I don't even think a lot of people even credit Tony Iommi for some of that stuff that he came up with, like strings, even because he I think it was like thinner strings, because there wasn't such a thing then, and
a lot of guys were taking strings for banjos. Tying ball ends on them so they could have thinner strings so they could bend big. Like Jimmy Page, I think, you hear some of those bends that he does in the early records, and you couldn't buy that light of a guitar. He's not a big dude. It's not like he's a Hulk who can just bend everything. He put nines on. Well, where do you get nines in 1968 in London? Anymore, except
you're right. I never thought about that about Jimmy Page.
That's a great point. Yeah,
that he would do. It's like, like the first record, with the Telecaster and stuff.
Right.
Here's a great, fun question. I don't know the answer, so I'll throw it out. Who would you all say the first to take a guitar, like a famous guitar, like a Les Paul or a Strat, let's say, but I'm replacing the bridge pickup. Just I'm putting what now we'd have like a Seymour Duncan or a DiMarzio. I'm not talking about like a Brian May where it's literally being built from scratch for the first Queen album, or when Queen was getting going. But like just I got a Les Paul and now I got a really super hot DiMarzio or Seymour Duncan. Do y'all know who might?
That's a great question.
I wonder if it's Seymour Duncan with like, I know he rewound some pickups for Jimi Hendrix when he was still alive.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's because he just played the shit out of the guitar and the pickups like to death.
I think Billy Gibbons too. I think he did some stuff for him.
Yeah.
Billy. Okay. Yeah. So like Billy back on the early ZZ Top stuff.
For me, I feel like as it relates to heavy metal, like the super distortion is the thing. Like that was the pickup that like that's what Ace Frehley put in all of his Les Pauls.
Right.
Aftermarket thing. It was like, I want to play lead guitar. I need to sit up above the mix, and I got to grind this amp into, more crunch than I'm getting right now.
Yeah. I remember when I first got my first super distortion. I was a very excited kid.
Yeah. Because I guess like the distortion plus and stuff like that doesn't come till like after all that stuff, really, but not long. That's the thing. Right. It's just like this, all the stuff that we curmudgeon guitar players use now and refuse to use anything new. This was all stuff that came about in an age when it was like all brand new, and everybody in that world was like hungry for something new.
Yeah.
Like, eventually a wall gets hit and we're like, okay, we've kind of figured everything out.
And they had to work for it. They really had to work to get sounds. I mean, like I saw KK Downing talk about it. He goes, you guys wouldn't believe what we had to go through to push, our amps and pickups, to get those tones back then.
Yeah. My dad tells me he had a Marshall Plexi in the 70s. And he had like, I think he used like a Gibson Dirty Fingers, because that came about after the super distortion. Mm-hmm. One of his tricks to drive his amp was he had an Echo Plex, and he didn't even run the Echo, but there was a preamp in it, like a tube preamp. And so he would juice the preamp so that the guitar signal would hit the amp a little bit hotter, because that was the only thing he had that could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow,
They were just like, what do I have? And like, how can I use this all to just get more juice out of this thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I know one of the mods that they would do was mostly aesthetic, would be to take off their covers, and that's how they got the double creams, because Gibson had a bunch of cream,
the cream, the cream
bobbins.
Yeah.
But and then Marzio patented double cream. Yeah, they were like, okay, is that a thing? We're gonna patent it.
We're doing it, yeah.
So who do you guys think is the first guy to remove the covers from the humbuckers?
Oh man,
you know what? I think I don't know.
I don't know that for a fact.
I know that
it was. I know it was a thing though.
If you look at Jeff Beck's Oxblood 54 Les Paul,
the one
that's got exposed coils on it with the wraparound. But I don't know, because I feel like there's probably I think people were just like we are, they're just into tinkering and trying to get more. What if it's like, I think I mentioned this on here before, like maybe not. If you take the metal cover off of a Tele neck pickup, it's like lifting a blanket off of it.
Huh.
I think people were just like, will it sound different if I do this or don't do that? You also got to remember, there was a lot of money being made in the music business. These guys didn't have to go to work all day like we do, So they got time, like all their whole life is just like futzing around and messing around with their stuff to get the most out of it.
Yeah,
right. I never thought of that with the Telecaster.
Yeah, no, that's great.
So here's a question, not necessarily music related, but I mean, covered or uncovered on a humbucker, is there a difference?
I don't know that I've never A-B'd the same thing in the same guitar. For me, it's always just been like an aesthetic thing, I guess. Like my Les Paul Custom, it's covered pickups.
Yeah.
I took the cover off of my Duncan Seth Lover because I thought they were going to have black bobbins, but they were white. I didn't notice. I didn't really notice much of a difference, but that's a really low output pickup, and it wasn't like it got more hot by doing anything.
Yeah.
So
I
Seth Lover
the other day of somebody doing that. It was here's before and here's after, and they played both, and I was like, I didn't hear it.
Yeah, right.
I will tell you this, and I'll tell you this from the School of Hard Knocks. If you put a cover on a humbucker and you don't wax pot it, you may get all kinds of noises that you don't want to have.
Okay.
And people will bring them back to you and ask you to wax pot them.
All right.
My 59 reissue has covered unpotted pickups.
Yeah.
And
I don't know. What does that do exactly, though?
It just kind of muffle. So you kind of they get very microphonic, and they kind of almost, I would describe it as they kind of feedback and echo inside that cover.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's, I think the cover doesn't help, but the coils are just screwed in there. Yeah. And then the vibrations of like a loud amp will shake it ever so slightly.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now when you're playing it at a certain level, at a certain amount of gain, it does add a thing to the tone that's really, really cool, I think. It's got this chime that a potted pickup loses. So the wax potting keeps that shaking from happening, so it doesn't pick up these extra vibrations, and so you can play louder, play with more gain.
Okay. Well, you're right. It's almost, when I said echoey, it's almost like the ambient noise from the amp is getting inside of it, making an echo. Where when you wax pot it, you're filling up that void area with wax.
Okay.
Basically.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of like, if you have a guitar with like tremolo springs, how sometimes there's like a note on the guitar that will just sort of shake those or resonate those.
Yeah.
It's similar to that, but it's kind of across everything. And you really notice it like at a edge of breakup tone playing like arpeggiated chords. There's just like this awesome like quality about them.
Right.
But they are dangerous when the gain goes up. Like you're gonna stop playing, you gotta have the pinky on that volume knob or your foot near a tuner pedal.
Yeah, that's happened to me a couple times where people have ordered them, asked them not to be wax potted, and they immediately come back.
Yeah.
if not sooner.
Okay. I honestly did not know that. That's interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just kind of tames them down a little bit.
So Eddie Van Halen says that he discovered that, but I don't know. It's like there's all these like parallel discoveries that go on during this era too. So it's hard to say.
Well, I mean, the good thing is there's no urban myth or legends that go along with guitars.
Right. Yeah. No wives' tales either.
Yeah, I call it guitar voodoo. It's a lot of guitar voodoo, man.
Well, you know what? In a world where everything has a technical explanation, I like that we're involved in something that, like, some things just don't make sense, but we're going to create a reason out of thin air for it.
Yeah, that's it.
But I guess, like, if you go back to the 60s, other than maybe Jimi Hendrix, I think the majority of the guitar players in all the rock bands played probably guitars that you, for the most part, would buy off the shelf. You know, there wasn't probably a lot of modifications. But then as you get into the 70s, as we're discussing here, everybody's starting to tweak. And, you know, again, Brian May's got a homemade guitar for the first Queen album. And Ace Frehley's going to end up having a DiMarzio pickup in the bridge of his Les Paul. And it, of course, once Eddie Van Halen hits, you know, all kinds of crazy stuff, you know, Strat bodies with humbuckers.
Do you think it kind of exploded after he stared his experimentation with guitars?
With Van Halen?
I think I definitely was part of the boom for our generation. You know, of course, I'm 58. So, you know, back in my younger days, you know, Van Halen was definitely the go-to guy. Like, what's Eddie doing? What's Eddie doing? You know,
I think Eddie exposed that more, you know, like it was happening, but you know, I think he made it more public as far as, like, you know, and other guitar players kind of latched onto that kind of thing.
Right. I agree.
I didn't have the secrets to certain things.
It's like the hot rodding was going on because there was the Charvel shop that existed by then.
Yeah.
They were doing bodies and necks for like Strat replacements and stuff.
Bodies.
Yeah, Boogie Bodies, Mighty Might, all that stuff was going on. Yep. And then, like, with him, it's just that it's almost like he was the sort of explosion of that underground guitar movement of, like, California hot rodders.
Right.
Coming to the forefront. And then they have this person who will kind of expose that in a way that, like, also includes, like, highly bombastic, enthusiastic, and very original sounds.
Yeah.
So everybody's so it takes it from, like, this Los Angeles thing to this worldwide scale of, like, well, no guitar out of the box now is good enough for me. That was kind of the attitude after Vision.
Yeah.
Compound radius, you know, neck, you know.
Oh yeah.
You know, so
all that.
Yeah. Here's one for you, Shred Ward. Thanks for joining us. Lifelong EMG fan here.
Okay.
For this will be down Alex's alley. For those that have only tried the classic 81-85 combo, which we see a lot, highly recommend a 60 in the bridge instead of a 57-66 pair.
Okay.
Alex, you like the 57-66, right?
I do like that. I have had the 81-60 combination too. 60, I don't know. I can't remember. It's like the bridge. It's like maybe a little bit fatter. Maybe, you know, it's been so long. It's been like 20 years since
he also has a Glenn Tipton set in his Edwards Arrow. Edwards, can't say enough good stuff about him.
Edwards Arrow. That's tough stuff.
Then is that Adam Carolla? Top left. So everybody's screen is probably different. So is that me? Am I Adam Carolla? Yeah. Yes, I am.
Yeah. Where's Dr.
Hanging out here tonight in Guitar Land. Hey.
Yeah. We're going to start talking about
Adam Carolla has this gigantic of a head.
Yeah. You know, and another thing about the 70s, I think this was also a new beginning with guitars, is the double guitar attack. And you had a lot of, like, guitar players bringing in more harmonies and things like that. You had the Allman Brothers pop up.
Yeah.
Wishbone Ash and
Skinner.
And
yeah. And they went 3 guitars.
and Lizzy kind of taking it.
Yeah, Thin Lizzy, absolutely.
Step higher as far as, you know, a lot of the the harmonies and things like that, and Priest,
Right,
obviously.
right. Definitely Judas Priest. Yeah.
There was that happening as well. It was like this fuller, of the fuller guitar attack, of two guitar players. We're three,
Right, right. Yep, Skinner.
In that heavy metal context and what led up to it, because you have bands like that have more than one guitar player before, but the idea that both guitar players would come at you in the same pocket, kind of playing a lot of the same stuff, but maybe changing the chord voicings to make this
it up,
Yeah.
stereo with, and then bust into these lead guitar lines, but they're both playing a solo together, man.
Yeah.
What?
Right.
Yeah.
And that idea now is like taken for granted, but like, I think and it wasn't really prevalent until this period that we're in, where, like, I guess, like Judas Priest, Thin Lizzy, that, once you get the Gorham Moore eras going, really kind of shows the way to that. And what's influencing that? I don't know. I think maybe some of it's like the fact that they're writing these cool Irish lines.
Yeah.
They sound better with that extra orchestral layer on top of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Or this kind of medieval sounding kind of, bringing to the table, But,
Here you go, Alex.
Yeah.
Huge Immolation fan. Keep ripping, Alex.
All right.
Yes, Alex.
Says Adam Carolla.
Yeah.
And also, if you think about the 1970s too, and I think probably if you go back to the Beach Boys and then you go to the Beatles as far as like album production, like really focusing on crafting a record, the 1970s really, I think it exploded with that whole thing with like the huge budgets and production. Obviously Led Zeppelin, and everything that went behind making those records, and so there's that. There's Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon out, and just the whole epic production,
it was
that went into.
Very different approach, because like from what I've read about like the 50s and 60s, like, and recording engineers were literally like lab coat wearing engineers, and they were like electrical engineers. They weren't necessarily music heads. They were just trying to capture what you were doing with the and then the 70s, you get like superstar producers themselves, where the producer is almost as important as the band themselves, because they too are a musical genius, and they either have a great engineer or they themselves are a great engineer that have that wizard. They approach the studio the way a guitar player or drummer approaches their instrument, as opposed to approaching the studio as this sort of sterilized laboratory. Now it becomes the studio itself becomes an instrument, and the equipment within, and then like, how can we use this to take people on a journey, which it does come from like those Beach Boys and Beatles records, and the idea of the album. Yes,
you're probably right.
You mentioned that the first episode of this series where he kept blowing up Fender amps, so that the Fender Showman amp and the Dual Showman amp were their loudest amps in production at that time, and it was that amp came from working with Dick Dale to try to get more volume. That's why they started using 15-inch speakers in some of those cabinets and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
But Dick Dale went to a Marshall stack. I mean, it would be metal.
Oh, yeah. That's the difference too in the approach, is like when Dick Dale's doing it, he wants clean power, but he just wants it to be so powerful that it does what the stacks do later in terms of the physical moving of air and all that. But then, by accident or not, like the British amps in particular were like, oh no, these distort a little sooner, but it seems like the kids like that, so we're not going to fix it.
Right, we're just going to rock on, distort on.
I don't know if we discussed this the last time, and I don't even know if I know the answer to this question. Maybe one of you guys know. So, who was the guy that brought the Marshall to the forefront?
Pete Townsend.
It was Pete Townsend?
Really?
So I thought it was high watts, you know.
That was later. Because
Okay.
I guess he and Marshall had a falling out over some money issues or something.
Okay, so Townsend is the one who really brought Marshall out.
Pete Townsend essentially requested what became known as the full stack, but foolishly, it was one 8x12 cabinet initially. And then after, trying to fit that into various vehicles, he requested that it be cut into two halves.
Oh, yeah, the best idea. Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
Jeremy, you have the best way of putting things.
Pretty well put.
Yeah. So
after finding out it was too friggin' big, various vehicles.
Right. So that was, but in a music scene in a city like that, you need that George Jetson.
Yeah, right.
Like the Marshall sound was, and that was basically like a copy of the Fender basement circuit, but it distorted differently. It had a different mid-range curve and, different tubes and all that stuff. But it was Pete Townsend was the guy credited as going to so Jim Marshall was a drummer who owned a guitar shop or a music store. And so like kids were coming in and saying, we need louder amps, we need bigger amps. And back in the 60s, apparently there was an embargo on American electronics. Oh. So you couldn't buy a Fender amp unless you paid like crazy tariffs on them. Mm-hmm. And so like most younger musicians couldn't afford a Fender amp or a Fender guitar. And so they were buying, like that's where these British companies come in because they're filling a hole in the market, but they're taking these Fender style circuits, particularly the first Marshall amps are basically Fender basement amps, but with EL34 tubes, which have a different frequency curve and whatever other components they had there versus what is in the U. But again, when you turn them up, they distorted differently. If you turn up an old like blues breaker style Marshall and you compare it to like turning up a deluxe reverb, they distort differently, one's flubbier, one's tighter,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was Townsend using Marshalls on the records or just live with the Who? I don't know the answer to that.
I would guess probably just live because a lot of those guys would use smaller amps in the studio.
That's what I was thinking too, like a smaller style.
So like back then, like the stacks were basically to be part of the PA system.
Okay.
So like it was part of because PA systems maybe just had vocals and some drums, and then the guitars were the PA system for the guitar, which is insane. But that's why, again, if you've ever, I've only done it once or twice, like plugged in a plexi and turned it up to stadium volume. It's like shockingly loud.
Right. Yeah.
It sounds glorious, but it's so loud you can barely focus on playing anything unless you're like 100 feet away from it,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess would Clapton with the Blues Breakers maybe the first to capture the Marshall sound on an album, a full album with nothing but that overdriven Marshall type of sound on a record?
That is by conventional wisdom and history says that's the case. Yeah. Because he was going to one of those recording studios where it was like lab coats and, just sterile kind of, proper music people.
Right.
He was like, he liked the tone he got when he played that amp live, when he turned it up real loud.
Yeah.
And then in the studio, they kept trying to tell him to turn it down. And he said, I'm not turning it down. And his lack of compromise turned into everybody going, what the hell is that? Awesome, cool.
Yeah. I want my guitar to sound like that. Yeah. Everybody, Hendrix, Jeff Beck, and everybody getting cool overdriven tones. And
like distortion had existed in that like the Kinks kind of way where you cut a hole in your speaker. But this was like,
right? Yeah.
This was like, I don't know about you guys, but I really whenever I hear an amp that sounds like it's about to blow up, even though it probably won't, like that's a nice sound.
Yeah.
Right. That's rock and roll, baby.
It's that on the edge, like everything is just like so alive.
It's like, yeah, and it sounds like it's just about to just break up and dissipate, but it's it's like like right on the
so bad, but it's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, we could fast forward a few years into the 70s and the first AC/DC record coming out.
Oh yeah,
that guitar tone, like you talk about loud and just kind of bombastic and just growly and nasty. It's still. I mean, I said it before. AC/DC to me is like, the greatest rock and roll band ever. But
yeah, I'm a huge fan. Love them. Man.
Yeah, I can't think
pure rock and roll. But it's like you had a new sound because they were kind of taking Chuck Berry and Little Richard and taking that, but it was just like this really nasty, attitude to everything that compared to Little Richard and Chuck Berry.
They had a sense of danger.
Danger, yeah.
Like Chuck Berry probably had that sense of danger in the 50s, but they were doing it with again, the amps got bigger, the guitars became solid body by then, and also it's like a translation thing. So like much like the blues guys of America getting reinterpreted by the British teenagers and college kids in the 60s, you have 50s American rock and roll getting reinterpreted by kids on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
We love those records. In their mind, they're imitating them the same way, like in MC5's mind, I think they thought they were a Motown band. So like, I think they sound like, but in reality, there's like a twist to it that's coming out that makes it quite original to itself.
Or like the Stooges. Like, where did that come?
Right.
But AC/DC, you go again. You have the double guitar attack, and it's just overload riff galore. It's just the combination of Malcolm's just tightness and Angus maybe a little bit looser, I think, in certain ways. And that combination of those two just made this new sound. This huge big guitar tone. Because
they did that heavy metal approach of taking two guitars and making them one giant guitar.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you listen to their parts individually when they're playing rhythm, they're interplaying and they're layered and weaving a lot of the time.
Yeah, totally.
They're playing different voicings of the same chord, or one guy's picking a certain rhythm pattern, the other guy's playing it similar, but not quite the same. Like I found on YouTube, this probably still there. There's a isolated live guitar, Malcolm playing Hell's Bells. Isn't the 70s, I know, but and just hearing the clacky Gretsch and his right hand approach, it's not what you hear when you think of it in your head being played, because it's in your head, you're hearing Angus and Malcolm's thing together. And when you're playing it on guitar, you're probably playing some version of that. But he's doing these weird rhythm things with the pick that are just like genius. But like you said, super tight.
Well, and also, getting back to just relating to Malcolm Young, getting back to, guitar tinkering and customizing guitars.
Oh, geez, yeah.
He tore out the bridge pickup out of that Gretsch. So I think there's something that's been talked about forever about a guitar with one humbucker, and the tone, because you don't have that other bridge pickup that pull, the magnet there still.
Apparently the neck pickup's magnetic field is the one that you always have to be like, it does affect how the string vibrates, from what I understand. This is more guitar voodoo, like Roger said, but I have heard that a lot of people, if they play single humbucker guitars or single pickup guitars, that the tone just has a little more something because that magnetic field is not interfering with the way the strings vibrate.
Yeah.
All right.
And you know, you got the one, the P90, that one. And
Oh yeah,
nasty big tone to it. You know that Leslie.
yeah.
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 know,
There's
one
just-
pickup, you know.
and there's also a couple less knobs and potentiometers and capacitors in the guitar to get in the way of, you know, coloring the sound too.
Right.
You know, I've seen the Stephen Edgerton from the Descendants. He has a signature Ernie Ball guitar that doesn't have a volume knob on it. It's just a humbucker straight to the output jack.
Oh wow.
He's like,
Wow. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Shredboard, so I'm watching the comments over to the right. They've gotten way ahead of me. Shredboard, if you throw the name of your album up, I'll throw it up on the screen for you, and I'll tag it. I'm just kind of watching their conversation too.
Okay.
I'm not watching the Washington football game over here. I'm not watching that either.
Thanks for the clarification.
We may have to rethink this Thursday night because we're interfering with everybody's football night. Eagles was last week. This week is Washington. I mean, not there.
Evan Williams is talking about these Red Bear amps that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me back up. So we started. Not to interrupt you, Jeremy.
Yeah.
So it started right here. The loudest sample I've ever played through was a Freya Deliverance.
Oh, okay.
Insane Headroom.
Oh.
Come over and play this high watt.
Excuse me?
I said, come over and play this high watt, Shredder.
All right. So Evan kicked in the old Red Bear heads.
Yeah. So those, Alex or Rick, have you ever played those Red Bears?
I have not. I'm
So
not. No.
I ran into them a few times in New York at this hourly rehearsal studio, and I didn't know what they were. I plug it in, and I'm just like, this is one of the coolest sounding, like hard rock, borderline heavy metal amps ever. And I look at the back to get more information. It's made in Russia. So it's like a Russian-made JCM 800
Like the
clone.
Russian JCM 800. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But they're hard to find, but like they're fairly affordable, and I feel like with them being at a rehearsal studio every time I went there, that they must have been more reliable than like the Sovtek Russian stuff, because those things were cool, but they kind of always fell apart. But yeah, the Red Bear stuff was cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
And here, I told him I
There it is.
Black Matter,
Okay.
Funeral Doom.
Cool.
Cool, man.
And I'll do that. I just kind of
So Red Bear, does that predate Sovtek?
No, this was I think this was post-communist. I think it was like, I think they came out in like the early 90s.
Okay.
That's what I understand. I was playing them in the early 2000s, but I was like, I only ever saw them a few times at these, I don't even remember which place it was. It was like an hourly rehearsal place, you know? And
more.
I just remember always thinking like, man, if I ever see one of these in the store for the right price, like I should get one. And then at this point, I probably wouldn't, because I have other stuff that scratches that itch, but like I've never seen them anywhere. They're wild.
In real
If
life.
you see one, just try it out because they're cool.
Scroll down further. There was more.
Oh, all right. Keep scrolling.
Roger's
Roger, all the
learning to
comments.
work the little wheelie thing on the mouse.
Okay.
Appreciate the comments. We're just trying to get through them all here.
Yeah. And I'm like, thanks. And then
Yes.
teachers with us. I wonder if
All
Angus
right.
Young played it.
I
Wow,
have seen him play a Les Paul, Angus Young.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Yeah. I think I remember an interview once where he said he does have a few Les Pauls for recording, because, you know, it's like all of us, like I play a certain kind of guitar live most of the time, but in the studio, sometimes that's not the right guitar for the moment of the song. Or for the mix of what's going on. Like I've got 5 Les Pauls, and like they all sound different and when you're recording, different guitars work in different keys better.
Uh-huh.
It's like they cut through the mix with everything else around it differently. So
yeah.
Out of all your Les Pauls, which one do you think has the best sound to it?
all of them. No, the one with
I know, like
the one with this 3-alarm guitar pickup in it. No, my favorite that I'm most connected to is my custom, but I don't know if that's just because it was my first and I'm just attached to that sound. But it does have kind of the best of the old with the new sort of vibe to the overall tone. But I mean, I love my 59.
You know what? As I finished asking that question, I realized I put you in a really bad position because your wife bought you one of those.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like,
well, sorry, didn't mean to set you up on that one.
No. That's all. It's all good. No, like, I think for me, my Desert Island guitar is my custom.
There you go.
Okay. It's my sound, but you know, when I'm playing the 59, I'm very happy. The 56, I'm very happy. Yeah. And the studios I have, they're like workhorses and they sound, you know, quite good too. And they play great. So, yeah, I can't complain.
Yeah. Let's see. We have it. Gibson had them built and I first saw them in the Gulf of Mexico. Gulf Coast Music.
Okay.
Store.
Oh, he's talking about the Red Bears.
Yeah. And then we have best tone I ever got recording was a Mesa dual rectifier with a TS.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I have to sound like 2 scoops.
Dude, that's real.
I love it.
Tell that to your producer. I need that sound, the 2 scoops of ass sound.
Oh my God. I have a lot of things, but I've never had 2
that's
scoops
a good
of
one.
ass.
That's a good one, man. I've never heard that
one. I've had that experience where like, so everybody loves vintage 30s, you know, for heavy metal. And I live find them to be very harsh, or at least harsh enough for what I'm looking for.
Okay.
When I put a microphone in front of it and I hear it through monitors, it's perfect.
Right.
So that story about the rectifier makes sense to me because some stuff sounds better in a room, and then when you hear it recorded, you're like, why is it not translating? And vice versa.
And sometimes you only want 1 scoop of ass, not 2.
Yeah. How about 3 scoops?
Wait. Is it a mid scoop of ass?
Oh, geez.
That's a good terminology.
Oh, man.
I love it, man. That's a good one.
That is good.
2 scoops of ass. I'm going to remember that one. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have a T-shirt made up.
Yeah, we got that's got.
That's an awesome band name. Hey,
no, so you should make
coming to rock you.
You should make T-shirts where it's got the guitar locker logo on the front, and on the back it would be like better than 2 scoops of ass.
Oh my God, I would do it. 3-line guitar.
There
you go. Nothing wrong with that.
I would do it too. Oh, geez. I'll do anything once, twice if it's funny. Freight Cabs Letter with Eminence P50s is the cure for high-end fit.
Oh, high-end fit. Yeah.
I like all the Fryette stuff I've ever tried. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I've used one of those amps in the studio. I don't remember.
Yeah. He's Steve Fryette's like a high watt nerd like me. So even though he makes like high gain amps, they have like that high watt sort of DNA in them. A lot of other companies, they make like you know, everything's either a Marshall or a Soldano, you know, at a certain point, but his stuff seems to be a little more original.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're reading where he stole his term.
Oh, yeah. We're kind of looking at all the comments.
We
love the comments, by the way. We're getting some great
ones. He said
too.
he stole it from a friend.
Stole it from a friend who.
Yeah, right.
Stole it from a
He's describing. Uh-oh. He stole it from me?
What's that? Did he?
No.
I was like, are you the friend he stole it from?
Wow, that's funny.
But I'm the guy who probably bored him. So I would be talking about pickups so much that I wouldn't notice somebody stealing my cabinet.
That's why next, gents.
Why we're all here, boys.
You're right.
Well,
So,
I got what I want to talk about here. So we're going back to the 70s rock for a minute.
yeah.
So going back to Led Zeppelin. So we know obviously there's Led Zeppelin 1, there's Led Zeppelin 2, 3, 4, blah, 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 blah. Let's get to 1973, and they do the album Houses of the Holy.
Yeah.
And on that record, they start to bring in some different influences. They have like some funk, some almost reggae kind of stuff. There's some things happening on that fifth Zeppelin album in 73, since this is a 70s show we're talking about at the moment, versus like 69 Zeppelin, but it's still Zeppelin, but the page is turning a little bit, no pun intended.
Oh. Yeah.
Comments? We don't know about that. I mean, it's kind of the directions going. Less blues. They're not really doing much of the blues, less of the real, hard rock and blues.
Well, and this is
know.
where all of the bands were kind of getting into a lot of experimentations with chemical substances.
Yeah, lots of things are happening.
Yeah.
The epicness, you got like the Rain song off that record. You got No Quarter, it's just like an epic journey that the song takes you on.
It's where they kind of that's why I don't consider them a metal band, even though I consider them, like an integral influence to metal.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas like Black Sabbath, by that point in their career, they're getting darker and weirder and heavier.
Yeah, darker.
With like Volume 4 and Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, you're just like, what the,
Yeah.
That's heavy.
So they continue going down that until they get to like, Technical Ecstasy, where they think they're the Beatles and stuff. But like, it's just like they still, whether Black Sabbath thought they were heavy metal or not, like they didn't do anything musically to make us think that they weren't,
Yeah, right.
Well, and do you all kind of think that's a kind of a crossroads or a fork in the road where you have like the more rock, like Led Zeppelin, I wouldn't put in a metal category either, but more rock and roll. And seemed like the rock guys were doing more, I'll say it again, experimentation. And then the metal guys were getting darker.
That's a good comment.
Like rock was getting weirder, metal was getting darker.
Darker,
But in the 70s, you have like UFO and Thin Lizzy who have this heaviness to their sound, but they also are writing like really catchy, kind of lyrically like poignant, but like introspective lyrics as opposed to fantastical lyrics.
Right.
And so some of it's tonality.
Yeah, the guitar tones, like Schenker, like that combination of the Flying V and the Marshall, and obviously like you talked about Jeremy, it's not just it's in the player, it's in the hands, drums, whatever. And Schenker had a guitar tone that I don't think really was heard like that, before.
No, but that it's taken that crunch and that grind and just having it kind of up the ante, as this decade kind of does over time when it comes to like aggressive tone.
Yeah. And the vibrato,
So like Richie Blackmore's got the vibrato and the technique, but he's playing a Strat, so it's kind of
thin and
in the mix. It's here, and then Schenker, it's in the mix. It's everywhere.
Yeah,
like the guitar is as prominent. The rhythm guitar tone becomes as prominent as the lead vocalist in these bands.
Right. And the Flying V kind of makes a statement.
Yeah. It's like a look at me kind of a thing.
And Schenker was such a game changer for UFO as a band. I mean, they had albums in front of Schenker, but when Michael joined them, that's a whole different trajectory of where they're going with him as a lead guitar spot.
Yeah, because they were sort of like that space rock, krautrock sort of
exactly
thing early on. And then,
even with Steve Howe, he's not the original. And so kind of on a different take, and then you got with Tony Kaye playing keyboards, and you got Rick Wakeman kind of coming.
Wakeman with all his skills and everything.
Wakeman makes everything heavy.
Kind of migrated away. Well, not migrated away from the pentatonic, but he was more harmonic minor, right?
A lot of the diatonic style scales, and it's funny because Michael, some of the interviews I've read with him over the years, he would say, well, I know what scales are, but I don't really know scales. I just kind of find notes and I work through them and I create what I create. And if we do analysis, we can say, oh, there's a harmonic minor phrase, there's a Dorian phrase, there's a Lydian phrase, there's a pentatonic phrase, there's a blues scale that's really fast and ripping. And he's mixing all these elements together to get these brilliant solos and lead phrases.
Right.
Well, that's the thing about guitar players that drives other musicians nuts is like, I read a Don Airy interview recently, the keyboardist of Ozzy, and he plays for Deep Purple now, and he was like, guitar players don't know music. It's really frustrating because like if you're a keyboard player, everything is linear left to right, and guitar players, I can speak for me. I know the theory, but a lot of what I'm seeing on the fretboard is just patterns and shapes.
Yeah,
right.
Whereas a typical musician sees notes in like a linear fashion. And so I kind of believe what he's saying when he's like, I know these patterns and shapes, and I know if I go down a half step here, it's going to have a tonality that going a whole step down, like minor to harmonic minor or something like that. But he's not saying I'm going to write a harmonic minor passage. It's just that's the note that in my head gets forth the thing I'm trying to get across.
Yes, I'm with you.
But if you if a keyboard player asks a guitar player, like, what'd you just do there? That was brilliant. The guitar player might just be like, I don't know, this, like they're not gonna be like, oh, it's in the key of G minor, but I go Dorian for this one little passage and a blah, blah, blah. Like our brains are thinking too fast for that sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like how I learned how to play guitar. I had a guitar and didn't know how to tune it or anything, but I was just sitting watching TV and I would just listen to the commercials and I would find the notes of the music in the commercials.
Yeah. The guitar student
I kind of just figured out myself around the fretboard.
Yeah.
That blew my mind the first time he told me a similar story. We were sitting right there and working on one of his guitars. And I handed it to him. I said, how's it feel? And he ripped down something. I said, what was that? He goes, I don't know. I just did it. It doesn't even make sense to me. It's like, what do you mean you just did it?
And, to get back to the thinker, he says, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Like he has no idea really. He's a
but there's like
for the most part.
There's a freedom in that though. Like I found that once I learned scales, I had to like remind myself to, just because you know the rules now doesn't mean you have to go down the paved road every time you want to go somewhere. Like
yeah.
Sometimes like you have to be the judge of like, just because you know the minor scale doesn't mean you have to write everything in the minor scale now. Maybe you throw a couple ugly notes in there because the ugly note's the right note for that.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's like Schenker said, play and discover, and it makes a lot of sense to me, because, it's just kind of, if I do this, let me see what happens, and sometimes you fail and sometimes you stumble upon something.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
A happy accident, as Bob Ross would say.
Happy accidents on guitar. Yes.
You have to go for it as a musician. And when you go for it, you fall down sometimes. But
yeah.
But
that's the excitement of the whole journey, It's all right, where am I gonna take this next?
A lot less consequential to fall down with a guitar lick than like a skateboard. So
yeah. That is true.
Very true. That's true.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So where are we going next?
All right. Well, we're still in the 70s. We're kind of swirling around 1973-ish. Let's talk about this. 1972, 73, 74. Not just the music, the theatrical side of things. The visual side of Alice Cooper, the visual side of Kiss, in addition to listening to their albums, that was something I think that kind of expanded more once we got into the 70s, more so than say like when we did our last discussion a few weeks ago on the 60s.
Yeah, David Bowie,
David Bowie, absolutely.
Jeez.
I think we met Genesis, too, with Peter Gabriel.
Peter Gabriel, right? That British art with the live presentation of that. You know?
And again, is I think some of it's a reflection of, now you have college educated people playing rock music. So they're getting exposed to art in a way that, a factory worker from Birmingham maybe doesn't.
Yeah.
And then technologically it comes back again around because now we're playing bigger stages. Rock music is a phenomenon in the 70s.
Yes.
So you're playing theaters now. Well, what do we do in a theater? Let's do some theatrics.
Right. No, great point.
Right?
I agree 100%.
So like you have more room on stage to create something. Like Led Zeppelin didn't mess with that stuff. They just walk out there and do their thing. And I love that. But you're kind of taking what's available to you that maybe wasn't before. But I guess it was also just a reflection of just trying to push buttons because it's rebellious music. So like when Kiss starts, they love the New York Dolls. The New York Dolls was always a club band, but they were over the top. Well, we want to be over the top too, but we don't want to do what they're doing. And so what can we do? Well, let's all let's be superheroes. Yeah. Well, we better get big because being superhero in the tiny club is going to look weird.
Yeah.
Very true.
Something's not hard rock, but you had like Roxy music and stuff.
Yeah,
like that out, and it was the imagery, the whole kind of like what is this like Roxy music? What is this band?
Yeah, I think in the 60s, the whole performance art scene kind of had an explosion. Like I know Jim Morrison and Iggy Pop are really into going to performance art kind of stuff, where it was like, combining different mediums all in this one thing. And then that of course creeps into, you have people making high art in the form of music and then bringing in high art in the form of how they present it versus just standing there in jeans and a flannel t-shirt or sitting on a stool. They're like, no, like let's turn this into what eventually becomes like, rock operas like the Who does. But even just like, if you watch some of those Genesis videos of the Peter Gabriel era, you're like, these guys are out of their minds with what they're visually.
Imagine Peter Gabriel for the first time, with his head shaved up here. And
he got a reverse like all that, and he was a trendsetter.
Yeah, I guess it all probably starts with Alice Cooper and the heavy metal sense.
Yeah,
because it's dark.
I used to be scared shitless of Alice Cooper. My uncle was like, I think that was like his favorite band, and my one uncle, and I can't remember what Alice Cooper record was, but he used to actually literally chase me around the house with it because I was like, his eyes with the black in his eyes. It was just, intimidating back then.
Well, just the idea of the visual element of a band being this otherworldly thing besides just four friends who got together in a garage. The Alice Cooper show was performance art, but then you have Kiss. Like when I saw my first pictures of Kiss, I was like, this is incredible. And it's not like,
I was obsessed.
I didn't look at it just as a rock band. I knew at a very early age, as like a child, like this is a different level of what a rock band can be and what performing and being a musician is. And that's like, something that, I wasn't alive in the 70s when this was doing this stuff. I discovered even later and still get it. And then, imagine in the 70s, it's like you see that after having just seen like, the Rolling Stones on TV, and then like you see what Kiss looks like, and they're loud, they're obnoxious, they're kind of, a lot of people find them annoying. Critics think they're a joke.
Well, I can tell you when they first came, and we've kind of talked about this. That was what, 77 on the Paul Lynde show?
I saw it as a kid.
I did too. And I remember my dad's reaction as a little kid when he was like, what the hell is
Yeah,
that?
what is this?
What was
And us as kids, we were like, whoa, that's cool.
I think it was later 70s too. What was that movie? Kiss Meets the Phantom.
Phantom.
That was all excited, you know, and that came on TV. Oh my God. Yeah, it was all like
78 or something like that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
You
there's I think I watched an interview with Blackie Lawless talking about seeing Alice Cooper on TV.
Oh, yeah.
And he was watching it on TV, and his dad was in the living room with him. And Blackie Lawless was like, and he didn't say anything out loud, but he looked at his dad, and his dad was seething with rage that this thing was on his TV. And he was like, that's when I knew that's what I should do. Like,
Right.
but yeah, like that presentation of rebellion that Kiss and Alice Cooper bring up, or even Arthur Brown, that turns into like the most extreme form later of black metal, you know, where it's just like just trying to take the thing I've always liked about the best black metal bands is when you see them, you feel like you're being taken to an alternate sense of reality or a different place. And like seeing Kiss in the 70s is like that too. You're like, I'm living in a cartoon, comic book, rock show, fire and blood.
Yeah.
And you know what? It was good. If you were watching
the imagery, it didn't, you know, and I'm a huge Kiss fan, especially the 70s era of Kiss musically, but the image didn't match the music so much.
No, it didn't.
As a kid, I saw Gene Simmons and I was like, oh my God, this is what I'm
yeah.
looking at. And then I first heard it, I never owned was Kissed Alive, you know, and you know, I listened to that record probably more than most records I've heard in my life, but you know, it wasn't Black Sabbath. Like if you heard Black Sabbath and you saw Kiss, you would think that would kind of make more sense, you know, like the combination. So when you fast forward to black metal, Jeremy, you got the imagery that matches the music, you know.
Right. Now, and Gene Simmons's makeup is better than anybody's black metal corpse paint ever.
Still, yeah. Or even Alice Cooper for that.
Yeah. And like, but yeah, the show the music didn't match him, but like when you watch, and the show is just kind of chaotic too, because like they're just singing about getting laid and stuff.
Yeah.
For some reason, this demon guy has to like breathe fire and spit blood and hang from the ceiling as part of the show. So it was almost like it hadn't quite been figured out while also being mastered at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a couple, I think.
We got more comments coming up here.
70s was the best era for everything. Music,
hippies.
Oh, yeah.
There you
go.
Stay intact. That's true.
All right. Yeah. Can't argue with that.
Now you won't stay intact.
Hippies.
Hippies are cool. I think hippies are actually making a comeback. Well, they're kind of hipsters now, right? They're not necessarily hippies.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think what we have now are as cool as hippies were.
Okay.
I think hippies were like pretty cool overall.
Yeah.
They just like everything to be purple.
With two different things.
Yeah.
What's that?
I would say two different types of people, you know, hipsters.
Yeah.
What's that?
Hippies and hipsters.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean now. So yeah, hippies were their own thing back then. But I think same kind of thing. Maybe.
Okay.
Who knows? Who cares? Hipsters probably don't have beads in their doorway.
Well, hipsters are the type of people. Hipsters are the type of people that will like go to a Kiss show and say this is a joke and it's ruining music.
Yeah.
A hippie would be like, it's not my thing, man, but it's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where are we going next?
Well, how about some more bands in that era? How about the first probably West Coast USA hard rock band, if you will, that really sprung up? Montrose.
Oh, yeah.
Montrose. Yes.
That's an imperative influence to so many.
Shit, I'm going to
be people wanting to play guitar in a way that was loud and like that rhythm guitar playing. He's a cool lead guitar player too, but like that style of just like big chords, big riffs, soaring singer. Sammy Hagar sounded great on those records. And
because California up to that point, and we're talking 1973.
right.
So pre 1973, you have more of a softer California. You've got the Eagles, you've got Linda Ronstadt, Jackson Brown, kind of like
that Jefferson area.
Right. You get to 73, and now you've got Montrose out in California, heavy, loud rock, Marshall amp, Sammy Hagar screaming, and that was kind of, I guess, the West Coast introduction to your edge product. We already had Kiss on the East Coast, of course, a lot of amazing things happening in England, of course, and
hugely influential to like some of your favorite bands, like
right.
Van Halen loved Montrose, So many people out there, they were kind of the standard bearer in a area where that kind of music just was not as prominent. I mean, I'm sure you saw heavy stuff like come through on tour, but to be like, we're going to do this here our way now, for sure.
Yeah. Right. Sadly, they really only had a few albums. I mean, they had the first big one, of course, and then I guess the second album still had Sammy Hagar, and then he parted ways, went solo, and then they didn't really have a very long shelf life after that.
I've heard that Ronnie Montrose was not always the coolest guy to be in a band with.
Correct. I've heard a lot of the same things as well.
I mean, I wasn't there, but I've also heard that about myself. So what are you gonna do?
I live in the Bay Area and used to drive a Subaru. So people thought I was a hippie because of my long hair.
All right, rock on.
I think all of us long hairs have been called a hippie and been like,
oh yeah,
you don't get it, man.
Well, wait a minute, a metal guy driving a Subaru.
Yeah. I want to make a lesbian joke so bad, but I'll stop myself.
now we're in the mid 70s.
Mid 70s, yeah.
This is where things get fun.
Yeah, things. You got Priest kind of coming in. You got Thin Lizzy making more of a mark now. You have obviously we talked about UFO. You got these guys. You got Richie, Deep Purple, and start Rainbow with Ronnie Dio, and actually the first Rainbow record is most of the Elf lineup, actually.
Right. Very, very true. You're correct. Yeah.
So there's a whole new kind of thing happening now.
Well, I think Rainbow in particular is another one of those, like, it was hard rock and they were calling it heavy metal, and then it turns into like, this is changing the shape of what this heavy metal stuff is from this point forward.
Right.
Yeah.
The lyrical themes, the classical guitar playing. I mean, Cozy Powell on drums, I think. Rainbow Rising and Long Live Rock and Roll, at least. Just like prototypical stuff that before it exists, you can't imagine it, and then after it exists, you want to imitate it.
Like a song like Stargazer you mentioned. Rainbow Rising. So it's like that song in particular was kind of like I don't know, kind of started like a new style of music, just
the epic
song. The epic kind of proggy, metal kind of thing that happened a little bit.
So later. When we had the Ozzy episode, we talked a lot about Randy Rhoads and his compositional approach to being in a heavy metal band with Ozzy, and how kind of fresh it was and how influential it was. But Rainbow, particularly like Rainbow Rising and Long Live Rock, or Rainbow Rising, I think, especially, kind of did it all first. It did a lot of that. Not to say that like,
and the production on that too,
but like
right production.
It was just like this idea of taking these sort of classical approaches, not only to the riffs themselves, but to the song arrangements, and adding the keyboards to do what a string section might do, and then just having the operatic vocals of a guy who at that point, shout out to Dio from the 315 area code, like me, having, because if you listen to Elf, they kind of sound like the Faces in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So much like Ozzy brings out the best in Randy Rhoads at a pivotal time, Richie Blackmore takes this guy from Elf and some of his bandmates and gets something out of him that he had not yet discovered in himself. And then he becomes a legend. A legend is born, so to speak.
Yeah.
But then you get a whole subgenre of like power metal. What we know as power metal, I feel like starts with Rainbow.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. And there's no upbeat, like major key radio hit songs for the most part. There's some heavy stuff that does become like singles and stuff, but like
and then first you got the magic combination of Dio and Richie writing songs together, and then years later you got Dio and Tony Iommi that kind of reinvent the wheel again. You know,
they reinvent the band that invented heavy metal.
Yeah, right. Reinvent.
Yeah. So the mid 70s, I think, is really when thing you got AC/DC's going, Priest, and then 78, 77 the first Van Halen's recorded, 78 the album comes out. That just what that album did, and I mean, not just to mention Eddie, but the whole combination of the four of those guys. Like, wow, the frontman thing and David Lee Roth, like he just took the whole frontman to another level,
Yeah.
And
well, if you watch the video of Black Oak, Arkansas, a few years prior,
Jim Dandy,
you'd be like, "See what you're doing, guy."
Yeah.
But like,
I think David Lee Roth was a combination of so many different things that.
Oh yeah.
Able,
He was vaudeville. He was Jim Dandy. He was all this stuff, and pretty good singer at the time. Certainly better than he's singing right now, from what I can tell. But
I think he's kind of like David Lee Roth, and I'll say like Bon Scott. Those guys had they had feel. They weren't
in comparisons to
Ian Gillan or Ronnie Dio as far as like that kind of vocalist, but they had the vibe and the feel, and the vocals.
Yeah, well said.
It's like, what you make up for if you're a musician of any kind. If you can't necessarily do all the, musical, technical stuff that, we all yearn to do, you can always fall back on attitude, and it'll like probably get you more kind of cool things out of that than showing somebody how fast you can play a 3-note per string pattern,
Right.
And so like those are great examples of like Diamond Dave or Bon Scott. They're both two guys that have somewhat like traditionally they would be considered kind of abrasive as singers.
Yeah.
Not very refined, but also tons of charisma and personality.
Right.
Swagger.
Yeah, and confidence. Like that, those guys were like, I don't care what you think. You think I suck? I don't think I suck.
Yeah, right.
And then you got Motorhead emerge out of Lemmy inspired from Hawkwind, and Motorhead. I mean, I still remember the first time I heard Motorhead because the music was so aggressive, but it was still like I never consider Motorhead a heavy metal band. I consider Motorhead a hard rock band.
Rock roll.
Oh yeah.
But Lemmy's vocals, like I was just like, what the fuck is this? It was kind of as a kid to hear that, but I was so attracted to it immediately. I loved Motorhead. Then I saw what they looked like, and I was like, holy shit, these guys are bandits.
Yeah. No, it's conveying toughness and confidence through music, and the sense that you are not to be messed with, and it's whether in reality your offstage persona is that person. In heavy metal, like if you see Judas Priest live, like on stage, the persona is don't mess with me and don't mess with this crowd here because we're all gonna like stab you,
Yeah.
It's like conveyed through phonics. And Motorhead was a great example of that. But also, it's similar to how we talked about, AC/DC reinterpreting Chuck Berry, but through like the sounds of the day. Motorhead's taking a similar approach. They have heavy metal tone as a band.
Yeah.
The drums, the guitar, the bass is fuzzed out and distorted. It's like everything. The amps all sound like they're about to blow up, and a lot of them probably did.
And we didn't talk about how music got faster, because I would say starting.
Oh yeah, it was speeding up.
Oh yeah.
First Deep Purple. Oh, not first Deep Purple record, but first Deep Purple Mark II.
So is the I almost said Sex Pistols, but is the punk scene like coming online now and speeding it up? Do you think?
What is it?
At that point, like the punk scene's kind of coming in, like
Oh,
Sex
yeah.
Pistols and all that. So could that be what's speeding it up?
Yeah, I wonder if it's just a generational shift from the early 70s to like 7 years later, the people starting bands are 18 years old. They were 11 years old in 1970. And they're like, well, that's cool, but this is different and this is faster.
Yeah.
So
And the acid's out of their system by then.
And I don't know that. See, if you talk to like these metal guys from like the late 70s, they all insist that they hate punk. But at the same time,
some of them,
maybe there was just something about music in general that like kids of that era felt like speed was the new way to push boundaries, because volume had been maxed out and like distortion had a ways to go still, I guess, but the technology was still pretty much the same in terms of like guitar amps and stuff. And so it's like, well, what else can we do to take what they did and make it more? And speed becomes like that next thing, I feel.
Right. Well, and I could be absolutely wrong on this, kind of just dropping back into memories, is that's where they referred to moshing back then as slam dancing.
Yeah.
That's kind of where the violent, if you will, side of it, more physical side of music probably started entering into picture too. Is the
especially in the late 70s, you got these, bands out of England that were inspired by Motorhead too, but they're punk guys. Like you got Discharge, and that's a whole other story, that kind of came up, and it was just like, still to this day, if I put on, that early Discharge stuff, it's still like the most pissed off music I ever heard.
Yeah, it's very aggressive.
When's the first Ramones record? It's like 76, I think.
Yeah, I think around 76 with the Ramones.
If you watch
down picking, kind of.
Well, that's right. But then, like, if you watch live footage of them, like they're playing 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Yeah,
they're playing Blitzkrieg Bop like they sped it up to like 78 RPMs or something.
Yeah, well, Motorhead contributed to speed, so they said he Clark said in an interview, he said, "Well, we were all on speed, so everything just got faster."
Well, that's true too.
Yeah, right.
I'm not much into drugs, but in this, I've heard that cocaine might make you want to do things faster. And the 70s, as far as I could tell by all the lore,
I'll say you can't get nothing done on cocaine.
What's that?
I'll say you can't get nothing done musically on cocaine, at least in my
I don't know.
Except
the Eagles did, but yeah, well, that's how like it takes Sabbath forever in a day and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to get those middle records done there.
Yeah.
Like the idea of like, I think speed becomes the new aggression, and maybe some of it's to do with drugs, but most people don't probably do drugs to that level the way a touring musician might in that era. But you have like Roger said, the physicality of the audience becomes a thing that never existed before.
Right. Well, and so I'm saying that because I used to, we had the DC scene going on. I remember guys coming beat the hell to school the next day. Yeah. It's like, where were you? Oh, Georgetown, DC. And they were all punker guys,
Oh, well, DC is,
they come in bruised up, man. Like you wouldn't believe.
There was in those days, you had, Minor Threat.
Yeah.
Bad Brains who were from
Bad Brains. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. So
And
what year are we going to leave off in? We're at 144 now.
Yeah. So
Going up to about the end of the 70s, kind of cut it off before we really hit 80, which is a whole
the
other
80s. I feel
thing.
like 1980 is similar to 1970, where like you just have a creative explosion. Like the year 1980 alone, if you go through all the like heavy metal records put out that year, you're like, damn. So yeah, I think that could be the place to.
Yeah, we'll save that 80 for the next episode.
We just have
Cut
to
it off
commit to never, like, I don't know what genre we're going to talk about or if this band, but we can't talk about Whitesnake.
You can't.
That's where I draw the line.
Well,
No, Whitesnake.
okay. We will if we get to the 80s and we talk about Whitesnake, we'll refer to it as the John Sykes Band.
Yeah,
The John Sykes.
let's just pretend they never existed.
Wow.
So, and who else?
Well, I remember you telling
Who else don't I like, Alex?
Ingve, right?
Ingve, yeah. Well,
I remember in our old one of our
Here's
lessons, you
the
said
thing.
Whitesnake and Ingve were the two you threw out.
yeah, Alex knows that.
We'll be talking a lot about Ingve if we're talking about 80s and the things changing with guitar. So,
Oh yeah.
I'll mentally prepare myself.
Yes. You maybe take a bathroom break or something.
yeah, and to set us up.
You're expected to command.
Wow.
I don't know. Oh, wait a minute. They just scored.
I don't know. They might make a last minute surge here.
Yeah, it ain't gonna look. It doesn't look good.
Not a lot of time left.
Yeah, this. So we talked about this earlier. Last week we did the show and it was the Eagles game. So we knew all the guys from Phillies were probably watching the game. And I was watching the news earlier. I told Rick when he got here. I was watching the news and they kept talking about the game tonight. And I looked at my wife. I said, "Why do they keep?" I still call them the Redskins. I'm like, "Why do they keep talking about the Redskins?" She goes, "Oh, the game's on tonight." I was like, "What?
Oh yeah,
They do this?"
Yeah.
It could be football 7 nights a week at some point.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I got out of watching it for a while, but I'd like to see them.
Can I mention one band I think we've overlooked this as we are doing the 70s here? I'm going to backtrack to about 1974.
Yeah.
We went up north, our friends of the north, the Canadian trio Rush.
Oh,
First
dude.
Rush album.
Yeah, how do we forget Rush?
1974.
And also another Canadian band. You got like April Wine.
Oh yeah, April Wine. Yeah.
Triumph. And,
Triumph.
So
I think, yeah.
how do we leave that out?
Rush are the kings because I mean they have all the elements that would come to influence heavy metal without real. You can't call them a heavy metal band.
Yeah,
but they have the loud guitar, the technical bass player with the grindy bass tone, the soaringly high vocals, sometimes to a point where you're like, whoa, and then the absolute juggernaut drummer. These are all elements of like a perfect heavy metal band, but they just were doing their own thing. Right. My dad saw them open for Aerosmith in the 70s. Said they wiped the floor with them too. They were a live band that could just like crush.
Yeah. And how big is the sound that they created with three guys?
Right.
It just and like at that time, like they're kind of singing about stuff like early on when Neil first joins the band. It's like a lot of literary and fantasy sort of based lyrics.
Yeah, you're right.
And that's super influential to stuff that comes on later too.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
and all this stuff, since we're at the end of the 70s, this will lead up into our next.
Yeah.
All these bands that started to kind of, especially in the mid 70s, kind of basically was a set up for what would happen in Britain with the new wave British heavy metal. And like,
yeah.
Alex, are you foreshadowing right now?
What's that?
I think you're foreshadowing.
Well, we'll get to that next,
Yeah. It'll be a lot of interesting.
And I think we talked about Shredwood said he mentioned Zappa. We talked about it last time too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I mean, where does still to this day, where does Zappa fit in? It's
like his own genre, basically.
I view him.
It's like his own thing.
I view him as like a band leader and a composer.
Yeah.
more than I do like a rock. And he used the rock,
He was like a mad scientist, more like it, you know?
yeah, like he used the rock band
Like,
format.
and you do this, and this. And can
Yeah.
you do this too? And let's just throw that in here and see what happens, you know?
Yeah, that I can't. There are certain like artists or just cultural figures in general where you're like, you were brought here from another time or another universe,
Right.
and he's one of them. I view like Hendrix like that, or a few different people where you're just like, or like Salvador Dali, like when he,
Yeah.
where does he come from when he comes in? Like just there are certain people where you're like, oh, you're not from here, but thank you for sharing your knowledge.
Right.
And
Right.
we'll spend the next 100 years trying to figure out what the hell that was.
I think Zappa was a little before his time. Like he was in the wrong era. Like he should be like now.
Yeah,
Probably
but if he was
fit in
now, he'd
perfectly
still be
right
ahead.
now.
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
that?
If he was now, he'd still be ahead of his time. That's the crazy thing.
Probably so, but more fitting than he was then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although lyrically, he wouldn't get away with a lot of that stuff these days. But
Yeah, no, you never know. Maybe.
But like,
It's
yeah, no.
amazing how much music he put out, the quality and the quantity.
Oh, I know. He was so prolific.
His catalog is phenomenal.
Just an obsessed musician, and well, yeah, again, like just a composer, and just like there's certain kinds of music like his, or I don't know if you guys are familiar with the band Magma, or like there's music that I listen to, and it's kind of nice because whenever you listen to music as a musician, you're trying to there's part of your brain that's like trying to figure out stuff. And there's some stuff that like it's just so out there and complex and beyond my comprehension that I can just vibe with it. And just listen to me like, this is not from the same planet that I'm from, and that's okay.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So are we in one of our episodes? Are we going to cover like the rap era?
The rap.
I told you I took a detour like in the 80s and rap there for a while.
Yeah, I remember that.
I live by DC. What we got to do? That's what we all listen to.
Well, tonight's episode, we're kind of getting this to about 78, 79. We're kind of not going to hit 80 tonight because that's so much.
That's a rabbit hole.
Our next episode, like we talked about. But yeah, a lot of cool stuff. And going back to the Rush thing too. So they had that metallic thing there, like we talked about. And then as they kept going, it got a little more proggy. I seemed like they brought more, like we got the Hemispheres album, which is very progressive rock-ish.
Yep. Oh yeah.
It's considered a progressive rock, right?
What's that?
I think so, but I mean, they've got so many little nuances.
Well, when their first record is kind of like a straightforward hard rock.
Hard rock, right? I agree. Yeah, the first one.
And even the second one, Fly By Night, with that's still there's still some progressive elements in there, but it's still kind of a hard rock.
Now they go full ape shit with like Caress of Steel and 2112.
Oh,
and then they're trying to figure. That's like kids trying to imitate grown-ups like Yes. And then eventually they become grown-ups themselves and put out like Hemispheres and
and
then like
Farewell to Kings, I thought was really
good.
Yeah.
And then they're like, then the Police happen and they're like, well,
kind of almost put like a new wave touch in some of that stuff there.
Yeah, well, I think they were just I think as as a band develops, you sort of there's things you want to prove to yourself and to each other as you go. And then you hit a point where you're like, okay, we don't need to do this because we need to prove we're good. We've done that. We should just do this because it's a good song or a good moment now. And they kind of hit that stride towards like the end of the 70s. But then they kind of become not heavy so much.
Right.
Like, but in a way that's still got the rock sensibility. But yeah, like, you listen to Working Man, that's a heavy metal song.
Right.
There's a lot of heavy metal songs and moments throughout, like up until they get to about Permanent Waves, I guess.
Yeah.
It's weird because I like all the guitar in the Rush songs, but when he gets to the lead breaks, they're always chaotic.
Yeah. Well, he writes. He seems. I mean, the way he described, like for example, the solo to Limelight. he said he wanted to create an atmosphere that captured the loneliness of the lyrics. So he's thinking outside of the guitar rock hero box. Because in the earlier Rush records, he's playing more basic kind of rock guy solos.
Pentatonic-y, rock,
Yeah,
a lot of the earlier stuff,
But then again, like that's another band where like every piece of technology that was coming out for guitar, bass, keyboards, and electronic drums, they were embracing and buying. They must have had a lot of money. But like, and just getting all these different tones, and with those tones, you're sort of like taking an approach of, well, if you're Alex Lifeson, everybody else is writing a solo like this, I'm going to write it like that,
Right.
Yeah. Geddy Lee did once say in an interview, the first 7 years of that band, when they were recording, this was Geddy talking, everything we made, we put it right back into the band. I remember him saying that. It would be the PA, the production, the equipment, when they got all the keyboards, the synthesizers, the pedals, everything. So it wasn't like they were buying, massive sports cars or houses. They were like really just kind of reinvesting in themselves to keep the musical going on from album to album.
Yeah. I get so psyched when I see that wall of high watts from that late 70s period he was using.
Oh yeah, right.
Where are those now? Why aren't they behind me?
Yeah.
All right, Alex, what do you think? We gonna set it off there and then pick it up?
Yeah, we'll pick it up.
Closing out the 70s there.
Yeah, we'll figure out when we're all available, and to do the next part of the series here. But
do it again sometime.
But we will be back next week, right?
Yeah, so Roger and Alex will be back too.
Yeah.
We'll be back.
Yeah, I'll try to 2 weeks possibly if y'all want to try to tentatively just put it'd be like the 25th of September.
Yep.
That'd be our part 3 of this particular.
I mean, I never know the date, so
that's
what it is.
Well, just to make it official, so I see 11th.
I'm lucky I know the friggin' day anymore.
The 25th, we can be back this segment, which I enjoy. I think I have a lot of fun hanging with y'all. And a lot of cool conversations.
Yeah,
I should be available for that as well. But we'll figure that out.
Okay.
I gotta say this is so informative and educational, and it blows my mind when you all come up with these obscure dates. I'm like, why don't I know these things, and how do they know them?
Okay, like we should be on Jeopardy or something. We could probably right.
I kind of wonder if
rock Jeopardy,
Is it the same thing that allows us to retain like riffs and licks and scale runs and all this stuff? It's like that's almost useless because it makes us hardly any money. And then we have all this other information that's totally useless because it makes us
I don't think in my case, and we talked about this earlier, like I don't think I ever knew it, so forget it. Like I was into other things. We've already talked about that. I was chasing fire trucks around, so I was in a whole different scene. But we listen to metal music.
But you were listening to metal, but other things too, right?
I listen to. I always say I'm a musical mutt. I listen to pretty much everything. If it's good, I listen. To it. I can listen to bluegrass if it's good bluegrass.
There's a lot of great instrumental things in bluegrass.
Man, there's especially if somebody's ripping on a guitar.
Like a guitar,
I can listen to that kind of music.
Right.
So yeah, I get into. Well, I like rock and bluesier stuff, I guess. But hell, I can listen to rap. I can literally listen to anything. Except for
Yngwie
Malmsteen and Whitesnake. I can't listen to either of them. It ain't happening. I'm telling you, it's joke, not joke. If it comes on the radio in the car, I will turn the channel and my wife will laugh her ass off.
Yeah, I gotta share this. So is a guitar line, and he said, "All right, Rick, no Whitesnake and no Yngwie." He said that to me. And that's all right. Well,
I mean, not that Yngwie was even going to be in the.
Right. I remember you saying that. I just want you throwing that out there.
Look, I don't want to reach down to Yngwie. Okay.
Yeah.
Although last time I said something dumb like that about Van, like this guy thinks he's Eddie Van Halen. It's like that's not what I said, man. It was a joke.
No doubt they can play very good and fast. I mean,
what's that? What's that, Alex?
my mission is to convert you into an Ingve fan. You know.
Okay, that'll be an interesting debate.
Man, I'm telling you what, a couple weeks ago, my wife, and she listened to, well, you know, my wife, she's kind of in the like Morrissey, Smiths, all that kind of stuff that was happening in the 80s. That's along her, like if you listen to Sirius, like First Wave.
I love all that
That's
stuff.
the way. She's into all that kind of new wave kind of music. But I forgot where I was going with that.
With Ingve?
So Ingve. So a couple weeks ago, she goes, I don't think I've ever heard of him. So somebody put them on, and I'm telling you, after 30 seconds, I wanted to smash the phone that was playing on. I'm not joking. I think I was getting mad.
Wow.
I was like, what is that noise? It's aggravating.
That's great.
And he wasn't even talking. And I know I'm going to take shit for saying this.
Yeah, all the hate mail goes to Roger here.
Oh, here you go. There you go. Bang, bang. We'll end on this.
Record they did.
Yeah, milkshake. That's
There you
great.
go.
That'd be a great
Brought it home
yin
with this
yang
hatred.
milkshake, man. That'd be a great.
Bring it home, Shredward.
Yeah.
You know.
All right, we're at 2 hours.
All right,
I
we made
appreciate
2 hours. Wow, another
I
2
appreciate
hours.
All right.
everybody tuning in, and
Yeah.
welcome you to come back next week
Always
and
fun.
like and subscribe if it's down there. If it's not, it's probably over there.
Yeah.
All right, good seeing everybody. Take care. Redskins are gonna lose, or not Redskins, Commanders, because they're not commanding.
No.
Yeah.
man.
So, all right, take care,
Uncommanded.
everybody.
Commanding loss.